Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Top Producing Zone podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Jin.
And I'm your co-host, Shane Carvalho.
We got another great topic today that we're going to dive into pretty deeply with you guys. And whether you've experienced it before or you're kind of on your journey, you might experience it at some point. We're going to dig into the idea of imposter syndrome, what it's about, how it's impacted us, and how we've been able to work through it in the course of running our business.
Yeah, both our business and maybe at times in life as well, right? You
I think
know,
so. It's
no,
funny kind of where it hits, right? You never know.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is that, like I guess it's not something I even knew about till probably, I don't know, last 4 or 5 years, or maybe it just wasn't something that was talked about. When did it first hit you, and how has it impacted you?
I think I think you're probably right. I probably had these feelings throughout like my career and throughout probably the last like 10, 15 years. But I think you're right. Like the feelings I think never was categorized, yeah, or labeled into something probably until like, the last few years, however long that is, right? And now
Uh-huh.
there's a label to it and it makes all the sense in the world. I think for me, I would characterize imposter syndrome as just feeling, for me personally, I would characterize it as, I don't really feel good about, the wins that I have achieved. I feel sometimes I'll attribute it to kind of, oh, it was dumb luck, or, some other outside situation happened and it wasn't really anything that I did. Or I feel like, I'm, maybe I've been performing, but somewhere along the way, I have this nagging feeling that at some point I'm going to get to a place and I'm going to get exposed for not actually knowing what the hell it is I'm talking about, you know? And those, and if it creates a lot of feeling of like dread, of like anxiety, of just overall stress in my life. And I don't know if you can relate to some of those feelings, but that's kind
Oh,
of what I've experienced.
a lot of these things I can relate to, but what's interesting too, and to give you some perspective is like in yours, from what I know about you, you're similar in this way, but I'm super hard on myself, right? Like
Hmm.
we're typically our harshest critics, but I'm really hard on myself. And so the interesting thing to think about when thinking about imposter syndrome, does it run parallel with people that are very hard on themselves? Or is it just some other, you know what I mean?
Well, no, I think it absolutely does, and I'm kind of curious. I was looking into this a little bit more because I was trying to understand it, and one article I came across talked about the five different types of people, or five different types of imposter syndrome, and I'm gonna name it out right now to you, and I'm curious like
Oh
which ones
wow.
you can relate to.
I wasn't
Okay,
prepared. I didn't study.
it's okay. No, it's
Five?
okay. There's five apparently. And like you can read like different articles and they have different ways of classifying. Again, it's just I guess they're getting more granular in terms of how they identify and how they label like imposter syndrome. But I think you'll find this interesting. So the first one, to your point, is the perfectionist. And the perfectionist, right? They have a need to meet exceedingly higher standards that are almost impossible to achieve. So, like imposter syndrome kind of fuels perfectionism. The second one, which I found also kind of interesting, is the superhuman. The superhuman is the type of person that like continuously wants to do more and more, and they just keep on putting more pressure on themselves to like justify their accomplishments, their success. The third one they call the natural genius. And this is really interesting because they think they set really high standards for themselves. They get into a highly competitive environment and they feel like their success is solely based on their natural talent or their intelligence. So like if something goes wrong, they feel like they're not intelligent or talented enough. Um, the fourth one is the soloist, which is basically like everything they do, they have to kind of do themselves and they can't ask for help. And the fifth one is the expert. And I can kind of relate to this one. I mean, I relate to kind of all the other four, but this one kind of hits to me at home because it's like they have advanced degrees. They're so well trained. They feel like they've invested so much time that they have to have the answers to everything. So I mean, yeah, you related to perfectionism one. Is there any of the other ones that you feel like you
One
relate
and
to?
two,
One and two?
one and two are definitely me.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just not highly educated enough to qualify for number five. I don't have
Well,
a what is it, double masters or what is it that you have?
I don't know, just advanced degrees, but like I'm curious about that one for you because it's like, yeah, maybe not the degree part, but you grew up kind of in the general contracting business, right? You kind of have the advanced, I don't know, PhD train, like on the job training when it comes to like contracting. Have you ever felt like imposter syndrome when it comes to, being on a construction site?
Not at all.
Not at
It's
all.
probably
Okay.
because I started so young.
Okay. Okay. But for you, it's
That's
one and two, huh? Perfectionist and superhuman.
yeah, I for sure I can relate to those. But I can see what you're saying. I guess if I spend a little more time breaking down three, four, and five, I'm sure that some of it applies as well. I mean, I definitely know that I qualify for imposter syndrome without a doubt. So I'll raise my hand for sure.
Like what situations do you feel like during what points do you feel like you've experienced it the most?
First of all, like, and I talk about this a lot, like my competition is myself, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not achieving by being better than other people. Just like when you're, oh yeah, you're a top producer. I take a lot of pride in, and I do take the acknowledgments and the awards because it's like,
Yeah.
for producing at a certain level and hitting the criteria, I will take that because it's for hitting criteria. But if it's like, oh yeah, you beat everybody, that doesn't feel the same. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It's
Yep.
like you were successful in hitting this criteria, so you got this award, right? So do you see the difference though? You see what I mean? So for me, when I have felt imposter syndrome is when I have achieved at a really high level. And then for one reason or another, life happens, right? So, I've gone through personal life challenges. I mean, obviously, we've talked about it a bit last year. I mean,
Yeah.
cancer was a big one, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like if you're used to performing and producing at a certain level, and then you're not at that same level for a minute, like in my head, it's like, yeah, you're not that great anymore. Oh, you're not good. You don't like what like I think I need to understand for myself in those situations is that just because you did not accomplish the same amount of dollar volume in sales last year doesn't mean you've lost a step on how good you are at it or your understanding or your intelligence. If anything, you just gained another year of experience.
Right.
Even if you dropped off 40 or 50% in production, most people would probably expect you to drop out completely. I mean, everybody kind of takes big life challenges differently. I got back on the horse as fast as I could because I love what I do. But there's people that not necessarily that they're milking it, but there's people that treat it like they died and they're going to be at home for like a year,
Yeah.
like just miserable, not doing anything. And so it's like, for me, I got back on the horse as fast as I could. But, opportunities came up for speaking and teaching other agents and other things like that. And there was moments where, like, without a doubt, I know the stuff and I know I can help people. But then it's like, I feel like I'm always authentic and always transparent and honest. I never pretend to be anything I'm not. But then I would always worry that they're going to be like, oh, he only did 25 million,
Right. The
not 50
results kind
million
of
per
don't
year.
match up with kind of what you're telling them sometimes, right? Or what you're
Well, just,
used to.
well, yeah, because I mean, it's like for me, like even when I'm firing on all cylinders, like I still know I haven't reached my capacity.
Right.
Like I know that I was given a talent that I have not even captured. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm humble as it is, but I'm not trying to throw this like a brag, but have I been successful or do well at what I do? Yeah. Do I feel confident that I know what I'm doing? Do a good job? Yeah. Do I need the client's validation? No, but I appreciate it. And when I do read back reviews and feedback from clients, I really appreciate that because we were talking about this the other day. When you're in the heat of the moment, because transactions can be stressful for everybody, right? Like you don't realize how much you're doing for the clients and for the situation, transaction, etc.
Yeah.
And so it's nice afterwards to go back. And if anything, that's a testimonial to like, okay, dude, if you have any doubt, play that back.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's great advice. And I think we kind of forget to do that sometimes. And I guess that's kind of one of the key indicators of like feeling imposter syndrome is because I mean, definitely what you were describing, I think, yeah, number two on the head, the superhuman, right? Like you're so used to doing so much and continuing to just go and go and go that you didn't really take the time to like reflect back, stop,
Well, and I
stop.
worry too much about what people think.
Yeah.
And honestly, like when we had Mike Sherrard on, remember when I asked him that question
Yeah.
and he talked about when he was making those videos and what he had not to.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because for him it was that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Putting his family. For me, it was the perspective of facing death or these major life issues last year. It was actually going through that whole thing. I still remember signing that paperwork before I had the surgery, right? And it's like, I may die. It's like, yes, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And it honestly took all that just for me to get on this damn video.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
No, it is. It absolutely is. And it is interesting. Like I think finding that internal motivation, that internal driver is pretty important. And like, for Mike, he had his family, like you said. For you, it was kind of facing the life or death experience. And it just became like, it sounds like it kind of really put things into perspective, right?
Well, yeah, then it takes away the like being judged because
Yeah.
the reason I brought that up was because of the fact that with the imposter syndrome, you're afraid you're going to be judged for not being authentic or being the real deal, even though you're being the real deal. So I guess just in case you didn't follow my point, what I was trying to say is that that was kind of like the final thing I needed
Hmm.
to actually push me, to not worry about being judged.
Right. Right.
But imposter syndrome can still creep back in at any given time. Heck, I've talked to you about that. I mean,
Yeah.
probably not in the last couple of months, but probably maybe the end of the year last year, beginning of this year. Like I had moments where I was feeling that way, and I shared that with you. I don't share with too many people, but you're like one of my best friends, so I shared it with you.
Well, and I think it's important to. I think it's important to like to talk through these things with someone that you feel like you're comfortable like sharing this with, because I think sometimes it kind of serves as a form of kind of like validation or a reminder that like, because oftentimes I feel like with this, it's very easy to get into your own head, right? It's very easy once we've talked about maintaining a positive attitude and mindset, but with this, it's like once you kind of get that one negative thought about how you're not good enough, you kind of find every reason in the world to continue that thought. And so like being able to share with somebody like you sharing with me, or like sharing with a therapist, or whoever it might be in a safe space, really allows that kind of reflection and allows like a pause and a break on the thought process to say, hey, no, like you, like from everything that I've seen, like you absolutely know what it is you're talking about.
No, I appreciate the fact that when I do have those moments and I share them with you, you kind of help kick my butt back into place, you know.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm here for.
Well, I mean, in obviously, you have your main career and you've been obviously, also now working in real estate the last few years. Like your primary job that you had first, I mean, clearly you probably don't ever have any doubts there. Would you say that real estate you have had some doubts, or
well
where do you ever feel it in your world?
well, it's interesting because I actually in both places I would say I feel doubt. And I think as I continue to progress in my career, it's been interesting. I feel like there are more situations where I feel like that imposter syndrome. And I guess I'll talk about both. Like in my main career, I think part of it is it was number five on the categories that I talked about. It was kind of the expert aspect of being the imposter syndrome, right? There's I think there's this sense of like that when you kind of, as you climb the corporate ladder, as you spend a lot of time with the team, at least I feel like, oh shoot, like I should know the answers to a lot of things. I should know the answer to how things work more so than like somebody who's maybe only a year in. And that's a really hard thing to deal with, because like I feel like in there have been situations in the past where, like, even if I feel like I don't necessarily understand something in a meeting, like it holds me back from staying curious. It holds me back from asking questions because I feel like, oh, should know the answer to this already. And it really, it limited my growth and my ability to contribute. Right. I think in real estate, it's similar. It's, like for me, I'm not 20 years in, I'm only like 7 years in. Right. And I haven't faced every single situation. I don't have like a general contracting background like you do. And so sometimes it is tough. For me, I think there's always been this kind of performance mindset for me, right? It's like, I mean, yeah, it's a Chinese in me,
Well, it's part
right?
of your. Well, you talked about being part of your upbringing. I
It's
mean,
part of my upbringing, right?
yeah,
It's part of like, feeling like I always need to know the answer, or I always have to like perform and get it straight A's. I think it's all interconnected for me.
right.
And so even in real estate, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I might not have that much experience, but there's often times where I feel like I need to have the right answer for my clients. And that's something that's always kind of been a constant like challenge and battle for me, that I have to remind myself. Like what works for me is reminding myself to slow down and becoming like getting to a place now where it's like, and I'm not perfect at this, but knowing that like it's okay that I don't know anything. It's okay that I don't know everything, right? It's okay to say, oh hey, to my clients, to say, oh hey, that's a great question. I'm not entirely sure, but let me go ask my real estate partner Shane. Let me look into it and I'll get back to you. And it's for me, it's starting to slowly become just comfortable with, one, giving that response, and two, just being comfortable with the emotions and the feelings that kind of stirs up in me, where it's like, shoot, I hate not knowing the answer.
Like for me, you come off as being, just when I've worked with you and we've worked on transactions together, like if I'm a brand new client, like the way you handle yourself, I think of you as a seasoned veteran, right? Like the way you come at them with data and your spreadsheets and how you manage the situation. So I'm surprised that you do. Like I hear you because I always want to know everything too. But I love the fact that you do exactly what I say, which is just pause, always be honest, and say, you know what? Let me check on that and get back to you. That's actually the right way to do things. Because even me, 24 years in, I still need to ask things like 24 years in. I mean, being involved in thousands of transactions, like we learn something new every day. Like I drop in our broker room. I mean, I'm an associate broker for God's sakes, and I still go in and there's things that come up. And it's just that, you know, we have those people because all they do is they keep up with all the changing laws and rules.
Yep.
All their job is to do is to be in the back doing that, right?
Yep.
It's
Yep.
just like, because I mean, like you obviously came up in engineering and you had what your position was and everything. But I mean, I'm sure that, where you worked initially, like I'm sure that there was other people that were also engineers, but they had different roles and responsibilities. And like you might be on the production side, you have other engineers that are on the sales side, but it's like you guys are still all engineers, but it's just that you have your niches. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You can't be the one person know all. Like you just
Right.
can't.
No, and absolutely not. And it's funny because I think it's, I go to number three when we started, which is kind of the natural genius. Like I think for me, that's something I've had to learn how to work through, is being okay, like not knowing the answer, and being okay knowing that I have like other people who are subject matter experts to go
Uh-huh.
and kind of rely on them for input. It's interesting, like you always hear about successful entrepreneurs and people who start their own business. They always say, like, one of the common themes I feel like they always say is they're not the smartest person in the room, but they know how to surround themselves with people who are very smart in their fields. And I think that's something that I've come to slowly learn, um, as I've started to build out like my real estate business. Is like, I don't need to know everything. I just need to make sure I surround myself with people who are the experts in their field. Like surrounding, like having you in my network of resources as someone who's an experienced agent, but also a general contractor, so I can go to when I have questions. Right. Having like a super smart lender in my back, like in my back pocket, like we know with Nicole Ruth over in Denver. Like she knows her shit. She knows the market. She
Yeah.
knows everything a lot better than I would.
We
Right. And
yeah, we
products that
talked
she would
about that.
offer.
Yeah,
Right.
we talked about that on our call today, how great she is.
Yeah. And she could be the one that, like, I mean, she can knock it out of the park. Right. And we've talked about building out your network of resources. And that's just super important. That's something that I think for me, growing up, going through high school, going through college, like my first jobs in corporate, like I never really understood that concept. And it really wasn't until I started building out my real estate business that I had to learn how to embrace that concept.
It's interesting because, see, for me, I don't like, for me, what I see or what causes that feeling in me is having achieved at very high levels and feeling like you're not at that level. So, like, it's interesting because you're having that struggle on your way up, and I'm having that struggle having been at the top
Yeah.
and having moments where I'm not maintaining that level. So it's just, I guess I never thought about it. I guess there's different ways to experience imposter syndrome.
Yeah, there are many different ways. And I think like we kind of alluded to at the beginning and kind of
With your five, like
yeah,
that was shocking.
yeah, it can hit at any point, right?
Right.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. Now, if you're watching on YouTube or streaming this on your podcast platform, if you could do us a favor, leave a comment down below and let us know where you're listening or watching the show from today. It greatly helps with the algorithm and helps us get reach out to more people who need or want to hear what we have to say. We greatly appreciate it. And now back to the show.
I think what would be helpful is, kind of addressing how we cope with this, because this can become a mental block and limit you from growing or reaching out there, right? Like in an example, like with newer agents, some of them are afraid to tap into some of their sphere. Like I've talked to some agents that have this amazing part of their sphere that, oh, no, 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 I'm not going to talk to them until I've sold a few houses,
Yep.
until like I really know what I'm doing. And that right there is a huge mistake. That's a huge mistake. And just that's how I experience it when helping people out. And this is where what we were talking about with you a minute ago is it's okay to say, hey, let me check on that and get back to you,
Yep.
even with the savviest of clients. Because what you have to remember, especially if they're people in your network,
Yep.
they already know and trust you.
Yeah.
So what if you're not perfect at what you're helping with? They're at least most likely going to feel like you're going to look out for their best interest.
Yep.
And because of that, even if you're not as experienced as Joe down the street who also sells cars, they know that they can trust you
Yeah.
and to have a good experience with you. And so it's like you can't hold yourself back because of that.
No,
But then on the flip side, they'll probably reach up to me and be like, okay, well, you're over here telling me to do this, but then look, you're feeling like an imposter just because you sold like 10 houses less in the last 6 months. So, I mean, I guess everybody kind of has their angle, but I think for me, the help is to be okay with, being where you're at. Like, sure, continue to grow and work towards learning and doing better. But you know what? The journey starts with the first step.
Yeah.
You're not going to skip all these other steps. You're not going to go from the first step to the finish line. You need to put one foot in front of the other for a while, and you have to be okay with being on that journey. I don't know if that's the best analogy, but I feel like you just have to be okay with yourself no matter where you're at.
No, I think that's absolutely I think that's absolutely the right analogy. And I think the other thing I would add to that is, you have to continue taking one step at a time, and you have to be okay like making mistakes and not seeing it as a mistake, or just being able to laugh at yourself honestly. Like what helped me in my real estate journey was I was just at the beginning, I'm like, I still remember, and I shared this with you. My very first open house that I did, right? It was one of your list. Like as I was growing out my business, it was one of your listings. It was a condo over in like San Jose, and I remember I just did the open house. And there are things that I think back, like there are things that I did super well, like probably experienced agents, sometimes forget to do. It's making sure people sign in, it's engaging them in conversation. I love playing music, right? And I like and but to be honest, I look back and I was like, I probably wasn't as prepared as I needed to be in terms of like knowing the house, right? And so I still remember like an experienced agent came in. I think she was yanking my chain, and she was like, "Oh, so where's the attic access like in this house, in this condo?" And she had me like running around trying to look, and I'm like, "Well, it's a freaking condo. There's somebody living upstairs. Of course, you're not going to have attic access." But it's like afterwards, like yeah, it was embarrassing, but it was also like I just had to learn to be okay and just laugh on myself. And it's like, hey, you're not going to get everything right the first time around. And like, this is a great learning opportunity, because now it's like, the more of these open houses I do, yeah, I mean, I'll have agents trying to yank my chain, but at the same time, it's like, I I started learning how to really cherish those experiences, because with each experience, I picked up a little bit more in terms of, okay, so what is it buyers are really looking for, right? What are the typical types of questions they're going to ask? If I'm dealing with agents who are bringing their clients, how are, what are they looking for in the listing? What are the things they want to know most from me? And it's like, every single experience just builds my repository of like knowledge. So then, now it's like, I do an open house and it's like, I don't really, like, there's no fear in terms of what I'm going to experience, because for the most part, I've probably seen a lot of the questions or a lot of what people are looking for already.
Yeah. Well, at broker tour for me, like before the first weekend of open houses, I typically gauge the kind of questions I'm going to be asked. And I mean, I already know if it's a condo, know how much the HOA fee is,
Yep.
what amenities or what's included in the HOA fees, and all that sort of thing. And then, it's single family, like it's like as you do more and more repetition, then it's like you're on autopilot for
Mm-hmm.
these are things I need to know. And then you always need to know like what's on the market around me, what's in contract, what recently sold,
Yep.
just know the inventory around you. It's like there's the basics, but then each house is different. Is there HOA, no HOA? Like, is it on a golf club? Is it on the beach? Like, you really just have to assess each property and get to know that stuff. But it's interesting because when you have that first experience with the whole attic thing, you're a little frantic because you want to know everything.
Exactly. Yep.
And so it's like you're so frantic as, oh, no, I need to know this, that you don't even actually stop and think.
No, you don't. You don't. You just, my natural instinct was just to be like, oh, let me find out the answer for you. Without
But yeah,
actually.
but you were nervous. You
Yeah,
were nervous and
you're
you didn't
nervous. I
think
was
it
nervous.
through.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I mean, dude, for God's sakes, you're a freaking engineer.
Yeah.
Like you can't have those moments. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, let me look for the attic,
Yeah.
in between the floors. Like,
Yeah.
but it's because you were nervous.
Yep.
Because I know you're way smarter than that. Like, so it's now you don't. That's the other thing with doing a lot of repetition is that now you're seasoned and you're comfortable, so you probably don't panic anymore. But
No,
I'm gonna pull your chain next time I come to one of your open houses.
that's fine. I'm ready at this point. Uh, but I mean, it is also one of those things where it's like, I think there's certain things, like, it is true. Like, when you get nervous, like, it really, especially for me, when I get nervous, like, it really affects like my thought process, how like it speeds me up. It speeds up my mind to the point where it's anxiety driven, right? So it like speeds me up to the point where, like, yeah, to your point, like, it's hard to just pause and think. And sometimes you just have to be able to do that. And that, I mean, nowadays, if I see it, I kind of recognize that feeling. And so I've kind of learned to just pause, take a deep breath, and then come up with my answer. And it's actually helped me quite a bit, even though it sounds so simple and straightforward. It's not the easiest thing to do, because you have to recognize it first.
When you're saying pause, you're reminding me of when I'm hitting my tee shot at the golf course. Pause and exhale on the swing. No, just because I don't know. I know different. I'm paying attention to just random, like the whole pause, breathe thing.
Well, it's the same thing with golf, right? I mean, you go and, like, if you don't hit a hole well, a lot of times you can get in your head, and what happens?
Yeah,
Like, you try to fix your swing, you try to rush your shot, right?
yeah. But for the record, I don't have imposter syndrome on the golf course.
That's fine.
There
That's
hasn't
one
been.
area where you're fine.
I mean, it's like beer bash nowadays, right? It's like not like when we were trying to play in college. But no, I actually I appreciate this conversation. I know this was actually a topic you brought up, and I really think that it's a necessary conversation to have.
For you, especially with real estate, being at the very top, right? Like, when you have those moments, what's helped you?
It's interesting because like that other little video clip I just had, about depression and how to kind of pull out. I think that a lot of it is taking a moment to really have gratitude
Hmm.
as well as review what has been accomplished
Mm.
and really just remember who you are
Yeah.
um overall, because like you take this moment, and like, and that's just the way my mind works. You literally just judged your entire career and your life being on this earth over a bad run, whether it was a day, a week,
Yep.
6 months. It's like, yeah, all of a sudden I have failed, I suck. The whole top producer thing was a fluke. I really wasn't really doing that well. Or like you were saying earlier, I got lucky. Like all that crap gets into your head. And so for me, because there's obviously a lot of different things you could do. For me, it's taking a step back and actually thinking through the situation versus being so impulsive. Because I'm impulsive. The reaction is just impulsive. Like, oh yeah, this sucks. Everything sucks. It's like that
Yeah.
whole like downward spiral. Like
Yep.
it's so crazy how quickly I'll throw myself into like a downward spiral over, something that, like I said, you can't. That's the thing, is no matter what happens in life, what kind of health issues you have, what other challenges you might face, nobody can take this away.
Yeah.
Like what you've been able to accomplish and learn, and that intelligence, that's something that nobody can take
Yeah.
from you. And that's something that you don't just lose because all of a sudden you had a bad month, a bad week, a bad year. All of a sudden you didn't hit your goals, or the other thing too is that, and this is for another topic, another day, but the other thing too is like letting people get in your head, right?
Yep.
Like you're having, so like you're feeling imposter syndrome, and then you have a random, because I love my clients and we have really good relationships, but then let's say you just have a random issue with maybe a client at a weird moment, or maybe it's like another agent or someone on the other side of a transaction, or just maybe it's a vendor. I don't know. It's like, I don't know if you've had those days where it's like you're already kind of not feeling that great, and then
Yep.
it's like there's like the 1-2 punch in the gut from
Mm-hmm.
like unexpected BS, right?
Yeah.
And so it's, dude, it is tough. Like I have a hard, this is like, we're talking about solutions and what to do. So yeah, I know what to do and I can pull out, but it doesn't mean that I don't go downhill a bit first. You know what I mean? Especially when you get that gut punch 1-2, it's like, shit, man. And because when you talk to me, it's like, sometimes it's like, like someone once said, it's like a box of chocolates. You know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
That's the approach with me sometimes, right? You reach out and it's like, what Shane do I have right now? Is he like
Yeah.
furious? Is he
Yeah.
jovial?
Yeah.
Is he celebratory?
Yeah.
Is he exhausted? When you recognize that you're doing that, pause, think about what you have accomplished, think about what you're grateful for, look back on what you've done, but go back like beyond 3 hours ago. Like go back, if you need to go back a week, a month, 6 months, maybe you went through a horrible divorce. Maybe it was like a bout with cancer. Maybe, maybe you had to relocate to another state and start all over.
Yeah.
Maybe you had some tragedy with one of your kids. Like whatever life threw at you, that does not define who you are and what you have achieved.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's a temporary state. That's a temporary state that doesn't have bearing on this, right? It's two different things. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the strategy. I believe in it. I'm human, man. So it doesn't always just happen like that. I don't just snap my fingers. Oh, yeah, I got this.
Yeah.
Here, Michael, hold my beer.
Yeah.
I got this.
Yeah.
Let's just go do gratitude
Yeah.
and we're good.
Yeah.
No, I mean, sometimes it takes going a little further than
sometimes you
that.
do that. Other times, like you kind of have to just sit with it, right? And we talked about, like we talked about this earlier too. I think it's important to share this with people that you trust, that you're close with. Share
Right.
like, what it is you struggle with, because it's not just about the wins. It's not about just the highs. It's also about the lows. And it's like, you shared earlier, you share a lot of this stuff with me so that, from my perspective as your friend and as your business partner, when I do see like, hey, which Shane did I pull out of the chocolate box, right? And it's the imposter syndrome one, right? Like,
It sounds funny when you say
I
it.
know, right? But like, and it's like you're experiencing imposter syndrome. Like, I know, like, hey, this is something that you struggle with. I can at least help to remind you or to encourage you or whatever it is. And I think that's also an important part of this is there's no weakness in sharing like these aspects of you, of me, with people around us, because we're
Right.
none of us are superhuman. We're never going to get everything right, and oftentimes like we need the people around us to for that word of encouragement or just that timely word to
Yeah.
help us. Yeah,
Even your partner at home,
yeah, exactly.
even if they're not in the same business, your partner at home a lot of times they know you, right? So it's
Yeah,
like they can basically step in and be like, "Hey, you know, because the people in your circle that know you
yeah,
are the ones that can, pull you out and you listen because
yeah,
they know you and you trust them,
yeah,
so sometimes we do need somebody to kind of pull us out of the funk.
yeah.
Sometimes it needs to be like a group effort even, um
Sometimes, yeah, and worst comes to worst, it's like an intervention.
I was gonna say, yeah, it'd probably be worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so I mean, I guess to recap, imposter syndrome was yeah, a great topic for tonight. And I like the fact that you went and picked up the fact that there's five different types.
Well, and I think it means, I think it just shows and highlights that it can happen at any point in our career. It doesn't matter if you're starting out, it doesn't matter if you're building, it doesn't matter if you've reached like what you feel like has been like an apex of your career. Like, it can
Uh-huh.
hit at any time. There's different ways that it can manifest itself, right? From the five different types of personalities. But I think, as you and I also kind of talked about in terms of solutions for it, sometimes it's taking the time to pause, to reflect back, to be able to recognize when you're feeling that, whether it's by yourself or through sharing your experiences, sharing how you're feeling, sharing that this affects you with someone or with the people that are in your close circle.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I appreciate you bringing in the fact that there were five types because I didn't know that. And then obviously we went over how I know how I deal with it. And then do you want to recap how you deal with yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's kind of, I feel like I've stumbled along with it, but it's slowly realizing that and just being okay with making fun of myself, being able to laugh at myself, just recognizing that I don't have to know everything, that I have people around me in my network, in my group, that are experts in their field and I can go to and rely on, versus feeling like I have to know the answer myself. And I think it's just I think the biggest thing for me is learning just that it was okay for me to embrace my mistakes and see it as a learning opportunity to continue to build up the things that I didn't know before, that's just going to help me down the road.
Yeah, and also just, for our, listeners, um, or I guess viewers if they're on YouTube, right? But
Yep.
I would totally encourage any kind of comments, any share, maybe what works for you, like how you deal with imposter syndrome, maybe any additional questions. And at the same time, I know we don't say this enough, but throwing topics our way that you'd like for us to discuss, because we're obviously always open. I mean, we've gotten feedback and done episodes based on other things we've been asked. So I think it's important to throw that back out there as well.
No, absolutely, and I appreciate you for doing that. um, Thanks for listening in, thanks for watching to this episode of the Top Producing Zone podcast, and we'll catch you on the very next episode.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much. Take care.